Okay, in this video we are going to be looking at screen geometry in ActionScript for Adobe Animate. So I've already built a couple things here. I've got two different skies in my library. One has the registration point in the middle, the other one has the registration point at top left. So I've marked that with a thing I called marker. Very clever file name. Now notice the marker doesn't have linkage properties because I'm not using ActionScript to place it. I'm using it as a marker within my artwork. So that said, I want to talk about the stage geometry of stage height, which I usually make a variable that says var equals var ssh equals stage height. I make another one var ssw equals stage width, so I don't have to write all those characters. That's like 5, 10, 15, 16 characters right there I can avoid writing by making a three-letter variable. So my life gets easier. So the stage height is the height of the stage, and it starts at 0 at the top and gets larger as you get to the bottom. Now stage width, 0 at the left and gets bigger as you get to the right. Now my sky that I made isn't big enough, and the reason I do that is so no matter what changes I make to my game size, when I go to properties and change the properties for size of my document, I can change this, and if I use the right settings for object properties, this can change and never have to change my artwork. So I'm just going to make these universally sized so I can use them however, wherever I want, and maybe even share them between documents. So if I run this, Control Enter, you see I've got two skies in here. One of them is centered, and the other one is just like the sample one. So let me get rid of this one here. And as you can see, that one's got the registration top left, and here's the one with top right. So those are the two different skies that I have, just to demonstrate the differences about why you would do it this way. So what I want to do is if I push Control Enter, you'll see a couple things. You'll see my sky does not even come close to filling up the screen, and its centering mark is up there at the top left. That's the natural default position when you say Add Child. So looking into my code, Add Child to the Sky 2 to demonstrate that Sky 2 is actually not the right choice, putting the registration point in the middle. So if I say Sky 2 and I say, okay, let's put this one and say Sky 2 dot, let's see, x, then that's going to equal stage width, which I didn't put in the head, divided by 2. So let me create these variables, which I talked about a second ago. So var ssw equals stage width, and you'll see that it wants to help me write that. So even though it's helping me, I'm still saving a few characters. SSH equals stage, and ActionScript is like, hey man, is this what you want? I'm like, yeah, almost. Let me push H. It says height, so it highlights what I could want, what it thinks I want, and then I got this going. So I have an extra character there. End lines with semicolon or curly bracket in some cases, we're learning. So now I've put that in the middle. Let's do the same thing with stage height. Dot y equals stage height divided by 2. So now it's centered, and let's talk about its properties for size. So let's say sky2.width equals ssw sky2.height. Gotta spell height right or it'll give you an error. And it turns blue when it's right. So height and width and properties, when done properly, turn blue. So this is SSH. So in this case, I'm using the stage width and height to control the width and height of my sky. So now that works, right? No problems. Now let's talk about comparing that with how I might do the same thing with Sky 1. So if I add child Sky 1, let me just comment this out. Here's the thing you might know. If you right click on this and choose comment selection, that will make that into a no longer works comment section, so it doesn't show up. So I'm just going to use that and put it aside for the moment, and put this up where I want to see it. So now we're going to say add child Sky 1. Sky 1 is the right choice. Now you could do either way, it's just a choice, but I'm trying to get you to think about object properties and screen geometry. So Sky 1, let's see, just add child Sky 1. Sky 1 goes up here, and the centering mark is top left. So we're just trying to see how much work do I save, really, right? So Sky 1 dot x is already good, right? So Sky 1 dot y is already good. So what we want to control here is the width and the height. equals SSW, sky1 dot height equals SSH. And there, my sky almost fills up the screen. What happened here? Something went wrong. SSW and SSH. I've got the thing. Now, that did not turn out the way I thought it would. And that's going to happen sometimes. So I have to think what went wrong. And again, this is about geometry. So what happened is my object got placed according to this position here being top left. Kind of surprised me a little bit, frankly. So if I run this, actually it's the width and the height. So the width and the height of the whole object, that's including that little cross point that I can't see the rest of. So what I'm going to do to sort of fix that is if I use this and I say modify break apart, so I turn that symbol into a nothing, not a symbol anymore. I'm going to zoom in and I'm just going to use the direct selection key to lose a point and lose a point. And now when I run it, it fills up my screen. So a little bit of thinking about math there, and that was confusing the width and the height having the extra points on there. So now it fills up my screen. Now let's compare those two. Let's look at my code. Back in here. So I went from 4 lines of code to place, actually 5 lines of code. So 1 to add child and 4 lines of stuff to 3 lines of code. I saved myself 2 lines of code by placing it in the correct position. So that's really helpful. It saves you a lot of characters, makes things a little bit easier. And if you make any changes to your game, it also makes things a little bit easier. Now, let's make a symbol. So I've got one kind of ready to roll over here. This is a ground thing, and I've got a gradient in there, which we'll talk about some other time. Gradients, you can actually do these in Animate by using this color panel, this palette, and there's different gradients set up in here. So anyways, I've got this object I already made. So if I right click it and choose convert to symbol, or I choose modify convert to symbol, now I'm making this thing called ground, and I'm using a capital letter because the class name, okay, when we make it into a class, it's essentially the blueprint for everything else. So in this case, I'm going to put the registration point bottom left, because I'm going to drop this to the bottom of my screen. So I say OK, and now I've got ground, and I show the name of it and the linkage name. They don't have to be the same, but it makes sense if they are. But this one's capitalized. So in my code, I'm now going to go back up to my instance variables and say var ground, copy of ground with a capital G equals new ground. There we go. So now I'm going to come back down here, and it's important that I put this after the sky because I want it to appear in front of the sky. So if I put it before, it's going to make it appear behind the sky. So I'm going to say ground or add child. Let me move down so you guys can see this better. So ground, add child, add child. Can't give it properties if it's not on the screen yet. Add child ground, and now that ground, as we see, is going to show up. I can't even see it. Here's why. The centering point or registration point is bottom left. It naturally goes to 0, 0, so it's sitting right there on top, but I can't see it because even if I zoom this out, still can't see it, right? So I have the original drawing that I made right here. I can delete that. Still doesn't show up. Still not there. So what we got to do is think about where is this registration point and how do I use that to my best advantage. So I'm going to say ground.y, the 7 is right above the y, equals stage height. And now there it is. Now it's not wide enough. And again, I made this sort of to be universally sized. No matter what size my game is, I can change this up. So if I say make this, I don't even know how wide it is, frankly. Ground.width equals stage width. There we go. And now the ground fills up the width of the screen. Its registration point is bottom left, and I could even take just to demo that a little bit better. Open up the ground, drag the marker in there. I want to use this to place it, and as you may recall, that's going to make problems for me. So now it moves it like the width of it is just a little bit too narrow, so the placement is kind of goofy. So what I'm going to do is push Control B a couple of times, use the selection tool to delete this, And again, it was based on the width on something else. So now it's correct. So if I change my game size, let's make it bigger. So if I make my game 800 by 600 and run it, it still works. If I make it much smaller, if I make it like 300 by 150, it still works. So the goal is to save memory and save lines of code. So again, let's think about a couple things that we learned here to wrap this up. We've already known a little bit about this variable thing. The variable thing makes it easier. We could use numbers, but the problem with using numbers is my game size might change, and then the numbers become irrelevant. So I want to use variables that will help me make it changeable no matter what. We learned that if I put my registration point correctly, I can save myself as much as 2 lines. And 2 lines may not seem like a lot at the time, but it's always going to work. And it's saves you a couple lines of code. That's, depending how fast you type, that might be anywhere from 30 seconds to 5 minutes. So you never know. So then the other part was where we place the registration point. So checking this out again, the best version, if we use Sky 1, puts the registration point top left, and in the case of the ground, we put it bottom left to place them where we want them. Now, not everything is going to fit this agenda. So for example, if I make something else over here, like a fish or whatever, let's just make a rectangle and call it a fish. No, it's a fish, trust me. And I say F8, I'll call this fish. You can put the registration point wherever you want, really. It makes sense to put it in the middle or at the nose or at the tail, depending on how your game is going to work. You can always change it later. Export for ActionScript, fish. Okay. And now let's put that into play. So if I push F9 and get this back, let's make a var out of that thing. So an instance variable is going to say var fish, copy of fish equals new fish. And the toughest thing that students face with this is knowing when to use lowercase, when to use uppercase. The instances are lowercase. The class, which is the name of the symbol's linkage properties in the library, is uppercase. So now I've got a fish, which is more than I could say for last weekend. I caught nothing out there on the kayak, but that's aside. New fish, and now we're going to add child fish. And let's just for fun, let's put it in the middle of the screen. So fish dot y equals stage height divided by 2, and that's going to put in the middle of the screen. There's my fish. And what I want to do is make this move. So this is a new piece of information here. We've done button listeners. This one is going to be a different kind of listener. This is a we have to say stage.addEventListener. This is a frame listener. And we're going to say event.enterFrame, comma, move fish. And then we say function move fish. And if you want to make sure these are correct, you want to make sure these are correct, you can copy and paste to make sure they match. And the event type, okay, is going to be whatever it says there. So copying and pasting, I can type it faster than I can copy and paste it personally, but you may not be able to. And this way you make sure you're making the connection between those two positions in the code. And we say void, and then we're just going to say fish.x plus equals 15 or whatever. So now my fish moves and he disappears. So to bring him back around, this is in today's lab, we're going to say if fish.x greater than stage.stage width. See, that number shows up a lot more often than you might think. Then, and then we have a curly brackets to say what to do next. Make sure you get 2. Some computers don't actually make the second one automatically. Mine does, which is kind of slick. So, what do we have? Fish.x greater than stage.stage width. Then, if that happens, if this is true, do whatever it says in these brackets. And I'm going to say fish.x is going to equal 0. And just for fun, I'm going to say, and trace made another lap, quotations. So now It's giving me feedback. It's looping, looping, looping. All right, went a little bit longer than I meant to. Peace out. See